I grew up in a tight-knit town where everyone knew each other's business, and your family name carried a lot of significance. My father, a welder by profession and a man who lived by a strict code, had spent his whole life in the industry, carving out a reputation for meticulousness and dependability. He expected nothing less from me. By the time I was 13, he'd already placed a welding torch in my hand and began showing me the fine art of balancing heat with metal. The first time I laid down a perfect bead, I could see the pride in his eyes, quiet, but undeniable. My mother, however, had different dreams for me. She wanted me to go to college, worried that welding would turn into a grueling, thankless job that would drain me over time. But I had already made up my mind. There was something deeply satisfying about working with my hands and watching raw steel transform into something useful. It felt like a tangible achievement. I met Madison in our sophomore year. She was bright, driven, and had an infectious energy that lit up every room she entered. While I was more reserved and deliberate, she was outspoken and unafraid of anything. We complemented each other in a way that made me feel we were destined to be together. By senior year, there was no doubt in my mind. She was the one. We talked about our future, dreaming big and vowing to take on the world side by side. Getting married right after graduation didn't feel like a rash decision. It felt like it was always meant to happen. But not everyone shared our enthusiasm. Her parents flat out disapproved, convinced I wouldn't be able to provide the life they envisioned for their daughter. My parents were more reserved, but chose to back me up, trusting my judgment. After the wedding, we settled into a modest apartment on the edge of town. I dove into welding full-time, putting in long hours with the determination to prove the doubters wrong. Madison went off to college, her tuition paid entirely by my hard-earned money. The grueling hours didn't bother me. I wore them like a badge of honor. What mattered was that Madison had everything she needed. For a time, life was good. We had each other, and that felt like enough. But as time wore on, I began to notice small shifts. At first, they were subtle, almost imperceptible. Her smiles grew less frequent, and the excitement in her voice when she spoke about our plans seemed to fade. Slowly, the foundation we'd built our marriage on began to crack. My name is Ethan Mercer, and for the last 5 years, I've been married to Madison, once Madison Carter. We were high school sweethearts, certain our love was unshakable. So certain, in fact, that we jumped into marriage right after graduation, convinced that love alone could carry us through anything. Looking back now, I realize how naive we were. Financially, we were stable. I'd been welding since my teenage years, learning the trade from my father. He started me on small projects at home long before I was old enough to work on construction sites. After high school, I briefly attended a welding program, but it felt like a waste of time. I already knew the ropes. Instead of sitting through classes, I took the certification exam early, aced it, and jumped straight into the workforce. With my experience in fabrication and fitting, I landed a solid job almost immediately. As I gained more expertise, I took on bigger projects that required travel, boosting my income significantly. Eventually, I even got into underwater welding. It was risky work, but the pay made it worthwhile. My earnings ensured that Madison could attend college without taking on any debt. Her parents never thought I could support her education, but I proved them wrong. When she graduated, they were just as proud of me as they were of her. In that moment, I felt on top of the world. But that feeling didn't last long. Madison landed a job as a paralegal at McMaster and Fredericks, a prestigious law firm. At first, everything seemed fine, but gradually, her priorities began to shift. She spent more and more time with a group of colleagues, particularly a circle of women who, to be blunt, didn't exactly value loyalty or stability. At first, it was just Wednesday nights out, which I didn't mind. My work kept me occupied anyway. But soon, Friday nights, our nights, became part of her new routine with them. When I mentioned it, she brushed it off casually. "We can have date nights on Saturdays instead. I deserve time with my friends," she said, almost nonchalantly. Before I knew it, her late nights became all-nighters. At first, she'd come home around midnight. Then it stretched to 2 a.m., then 4 a.m. When I tried to call, it went straight to voicemail. One Saturday morning, as she sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone, I finally decided it was time to confront her. "We need to talk," I said, setting my coffee mug down. She barely looked up. "About what?" "Friday nights," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. That used to be our time, Madison. Now, I barely see you. What's really going on? She sighed deeply and put her phone down. It's just a night out, Ethan. We have a few drinks, dance, unwind, that's all. I wasn't buying it. Club's close at 1. So what are you doing until 4 in the morning? She narrowed her eyes. If you must know, we usually grab food afterward. For 3 hours? She hesitated before nodding. Sometimes. I shook my head, frustrated. This can't keep happening. You're my wife, Madison. Not just another member of their friend group. They're spending more time with you than I am. I don't mind you having a night out, but this is too much. She let out a long sigh, rubbing her temples in frustration. Fine, she said, her voice edged with annoyance. If it bothers you that much, I'll stop going out on Fridays. I wanted to believe her, but something didn't sit right. I forced a tight smile. Good. We need to get back to where we used to be. She nodded, then walked off to take a shower. But as soon as she was out of sight, I did something I never thought I would. I installed a tracking app on her phone. I hated myself for it, but I needed answers. For a while, things seemed to get better. She stayed home on Fridays, and we reconnected. But old habits don't die easily. The missed calls started piling up again. The late nights grew longer, and the distance between us widened. One Friday evening, after a long shift at work, I checked the app. She wasn't at a club. She was at a bar. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my keys and drove there. The second I walked in, I spotted her sitting at a table surrounded by a mix of men and women. But my eyes immediately locked onto one guy, a man sitting way too close, laughing a little too loudly. No one noticed me until I was standing right at their table. The guy next to Madison was the first to react, sizing me up with mild annoyance. Can I help you? He asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. I smirked, playing it cool. Just got off work. Thought I'd grab a beer. Imagine my surprise running into my wife here. Madison's face drained of color. After an awkward pause, she cleared her throat. Everyone, this is Ethan, my husband, she said, as though introducing a stranger. I folded my arms and gave the group a sharp, overly polite smile. Nice to meet you all. But then something caught my eye. Her wedding ring was missing. So was her engagement ring. I kept my voice steady. Did you forget something? She glanced down at her bare left hand, a casual shrug escaping her. Didn't want to lose them, she said, as if it were no big deal. Sure, I replied, keeping my voice flat. The man beside her stood up, extending a hand. Derek Lawson, he said, smirking. Madison and I work together a lot. The others chuckled, everyone except Madison. Derek tightened his grip on my hand, probably trying to assert dominance. I squeezed just enough to make him uncomfortable before letting go. I was just about to ask your wife to dance, he said, rubbing his hand. That cool with you? I turned to Madison. Is that what you want? She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, I said, my jaw clenched. If she wanted to embarrass me, I'd be there to watch it unfold. Go ahead. Just remember, she's my wife, and I'll be watching. Derek grinned and led Madison to the dance floor. I slid into his seat and ordered a beer. Most of the group had scattered, leaving just one woman at the table. You know, you don't own her, she said after a moment, her voice dripping with judgment. I glanced at her, unfazed. And you are? Samantha. Samantha Brooks, she replied. I've been mentoring Madison at work. I raised an eyebrow. So, Samantha, why exactly should I take marriage advice from you? She took a slow sip of her drink, eyeing me. I'm her friend, and I know what's best for her. I didn't like the way she said that. Good for you, I replied flatly. But if something's affecting my marriage, I have every right to be concerned. Samantha smirked, leaning back in her chair. Madison's world has always been small school, didn't you? She needs to experience more. I leaned in slightly, my eyes narrowing. And by experience more, what exactly do you mean? Samantha shrugged, a sly smile tugging at her lips. I think you already know. I chuckled dryly. And I suppose you expect me to just be okay with that? She arched a brow. Maybe she'll bring something new home to you. I met her gaze without flinching. No thanks. I take my vows seriously. Her eyes flickered down to my hand. No wedding ring? She asked, smirking. I take it off when I weld, I answered coolly. But I wear it every other time. I paused, a thought hitting me. What about you? Ever been married? She smirked, clearly unfazed. Twice. I tilted my head, intrigued. Let me guess. Your husband's caught you cheating. She shrugged nonchalantly. Yeah. So what? I don't belong to anyone. I do what I want. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Well, Madison is married, and I expect you to respect that. Samantha chuckled and swirled her drink. Yeah, you keep telling yourself that. As Derek and Madison returned from the dance floor, I stood up, making sure Madison sat between me and Samantha. Derek shot me a look of irritation, but I didn't acknowledge it. His feelings weren't my problem. So, Derek, I said, breaking the silence. Madison mentioned you're a welder. Yeah, that's right, I replied, meeting his gaze. He leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. That pay well? What, $15 an hour? I let out a slow chuckle. Try 35. A lot more if I'm underwater welding. I took a sip of my beer before adding, oh, and in case Madison forgot to mention it, I covered all her college expenses. Derek's eyebrows shot up. You're paying off her student loans? No loans, I corrected him. I paid everything up front. Also bought her that new Toyota she's driving. Derek's smirk faltered for a moment before he recovered. Didn't know welders made that kind of money, he admitted. With a knowing grin, he nudged me. Bet you have some fun on the road, huh? I kept my expression neutral. No, I work long shifts and respect my marriage. His cocky grin told me everything I needed to know about him. These people were getting on my last nerve. I turned to Madison. You drove here? Yeah, she said quietly. Good, I replied, standing up. I'm done for the night. See you at home. As I turned to leave, I accidentally knocked over a full beer onto Derek's lap. His khakis absorbed the liquid instantly. Oops, I said, offering no apology. Might want to go change. Derek shot up, his face twisted in anger, his fist clenched. Go ahead, I said, locking eyes with him, daring him to make a move. For a moment, I thought he might do something, but then he hesitated and stepped back. Smart choice, I muttered, turning to Madison. You coming? She nodded quickly. Right behind you. As we walked out, I could feel Samantha's stare burning into my back. Madison pulled into the driveway a few minutes after me. Good. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and settled into the couch, waiting. She stormed in, her face flushed with frustration. What the hell was that? You embarrassed me. I took a slow sip. Did I? Her arms crossed. Are you following me? I shook my head. Nope. Just happened to be in the same place at the same time. A lie, but after she dished her wedding ring, I didn't feel guilty. You humiliated me first, I said, keeping my gaze steady. Her stance shifted, but she muttered, that wasn't my intention. Derek's just a coworker. I have to keep things professional. And Samantha? She's mentoring me, helping me navigate the firm. I leaned forward. Does that include relationship advice? Madison frowned. What do you mean? I exhaled sharply. While you were dancing, Samantha told me you should spread your wings. So tell me, are you cheating on me? Her gaze dropped. No. Are you lying? She hesitated. Samantha said, maybe you were messing around when you travel. I let out a dry laugh. Madison, we've known each other since we were kids. Have I ever cheated on you? She shook her head. No. And I never will, I said. I work 16-hour shifts to provide for us. I know, she murmured. I see your payroll. That's what covered your tuition, your car, everything. So maybe Samantha should mind her own business. Madison studied me. You really don't like her, do you? Not at all. She's feeding you poison. Same with Derek. Did you know she's been divorced twice? Both times for cheating. Her eyes widened. How do you know that? She told me. She wasn't ashamed. Madison fell silent. They're pulling you into something messy, I warned. But you haven't done anything yet, right? She sighed. No, Ethan, I haven't. Then what? I like going out with them. Well, I like spending time with you. Think you can start doing more of that? Her shoulders relaxed, and she wrapped her arms around me. I'm sorry. I kissed the top of her head. You know, I only ever wanted 3 things in life. She smiled. Yeah? What's that? To be married to you. To be the best damn welder. And to have a family with you. She grinned. Well, you've got the first 2. Want to work on the third? I chuckled. Let's do it. That night, we reconnected. For a while, things felt better. Madison stayed home on Fridays, and I made more of an effort. I stopped bringing up Samantha and Derek, trusting her to make her own choices. Then everything changed. One Friday, I walked in to find the house dimly lit, the dining table set with candles. The scent of lasagna filled the air. Like it? Madison asked from the doorway, looking almost too perfect. I nodded. Good. Tonight is special. Why? It's a surprise, she teased. Go freshen up while I finish dinner. When I returned, the lasagna was served, 2 glasses of wine poured. You always make the best lasagna, I said, sitting down. I hope you enjoy tonight, she said, her voice carrying something unreadable. I took a bite. Then another. Something was wrong. My head grew heavy, vision blurring. I tried to stand, but the room spun. I turned to Madison, confused. Then, darkness. I woke up bound to a chair in our bedroom. My wrists were strapped down, ankles secured. What the hell? I growled. Madison. She entered moments later, Samantha right behind her. Untie me. I barked. Madison hesitated. I'm sorry, she whispered. Samantha said this is for the best. For what? Samantha smirked. So you can watch Madison expand her horizons. My stomach dropped. I turned to my wife. You planned this. Samantha answered before Madison could. Of course she did. I clenched my jaw. And you agreed to this? Madison looked down. Samantha said it was the only way. The only way for what? It won't change anything, she murmured. I still love you. Bullshit. What the hell did you put in my food? Samantha laughed. Relax. Just something to keep you still while Madison enjoys herself. I tightened my fists. Madison, untie me. Now. She shook her head. Please, Ethan. Don't make this harder. It's just one night. You're insane, I said coldly. Then, the door opened. 2 men stepped inside. I watched as they approached her. And she didn't resist. The moment she untied me, I grabbed my phone. What are you doing? Madison asked, panic in her voice. I dialed emergency. I may be a welder, I said, my voice steady. But I'm not an idiot. Her face turned ghostly white. I had just reported her for unlawful restraint and assault. She lunged for her phone, but I snatched it first. Then I grabbed my car keys from her purse. No way was I letting her run. Give them back, she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. Not happening. She exhaled sharply, realizing she had no way out. Defeated, she backed away, watching as I sat down, waiting for the police. Please don't press charges, she begged. I can't go to jail. That's probably the safest place for you right now, I said coldly. Get dressed. They'll be here soon. You don't understand, she whispered, eyes darting around like a trapped animal. Derek and Samantha, this is bigger than you think. I don't care. I shot back. Put your clothes on. Seeing the determination on my face, she obeyed. As she hurriedly pulled on her clothes, her phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, Samantha. Samantha, everything okay? I quickly typed back. Yeah, he's pissed, but he'll get over it. Sliding the phone back into my pocket, I heard sirens approaching. Moments later, red and blue lights flooded through the window as officers stepped out of their cruisers. One look at me, and they knew something was seriously wrong. 2 officers entered, one taking my statement while another pulled Madison aside. It didn't take long. A brief exchange of glances, a silent nod between them. Minutes later, Madison emerged in handcuffs, fresh tears streaking down her face. Please, don't let them take me, she sobbed. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was just for fun. I said nothing. I couldn't even look at her. More squad cars arrived, followed by an ambulance. A female officer entered, calm but firm, and led Madison outside. The officer who had taken my statement approached me. She's in custody, he confirmed. I strongly suggest you get checked at the hospital. Medical evidence will strengthen your case. He handed me a business card. This is the assistant district attorney assigned to you. She'll meet you at the hospital. I nodded, still numb, and followed the paramedics. On the way, they checked my vitals, asked about symptoms. My head was foggy, but my anger kept me sharp. At the hospital, they ran tests, took samples, and gave me something for the pounding headache creeping in. Just as I started to relax, the door swung open. A sharply dressed woman entered, her expression unreadable. Ethan Mercer? Yeah, that's me. She extended a hand. Victoria Hayes, assistant district attorney. How are you holding up? I exhaled. I've been better. She gave a curt nod. The officers briefed me. We have Derek and Samantha in custody, but their firm has strong local ties. I'm petitioning to deny them bail, though realistically, they'll likely walk. My jaw clenched. Why? She sighed. Connections. That's why I'm also filing a protective order on your behalf. I scoffed. And will that actually do anything? It might, she admitted. But I can't guarantee it. How long will they stay locked up? They'll remain in custody until arraignment on Monday. And after that? I asked. I don't have money or connections. What happens then? Her expression hardened. You have me, Mr. Mercer, as long as you don't do anything reckless. But I strongly suggest hiring a divorce attorney. I let out a dry laugh. No, I'm done. She nodded, satisfied. Good. You'll stay overnight for observation. Your home is now an active crime scene, so expect a delay before returning. Then she hesitated. Do you own a firearm? I shook my head. No. Good, she said. But just so you know, our state has strong self-defense laws. If you ever need to protect yourself in your own home, you have that right. I'll keep that in mind. By morning, my parents arrived. Once they settled, I told them everything. By the time I finished, my father's hands were fists. He exhaled sharply. What's your next move, son? I'm filing for divorce, I said without hesitation. My father gave a firm nod. Good call. My mother's voice was softer. Is there anything we can do? I need a solid divorce lawyer, I replied. Dad thought for a moment. I know a few. I'll get you a name. I glanced between them. And I need a ride home. No problem, he said. Just call when you're ready. He gave me a look. And don't do anything stupid. I smirked. Come on, Dad. You know me. He chuckled. Yeah, that's why I said it. We shared a brief laugh before they left. Not long after, Madison's parents arrived, looking mortified, unsure if they should apologize or just leave. You're divorcing her, aren't you? Her father asked quietly. Yeah, I said. There's no coming back from this. He sighed. I understand. I'm sorry for what she did. Is there anything we can do? Her mother asked. I sighed. She's going to need a place to stay. The ADA is filing a restraining order, so she won't be allowed back at my apartment. She can stay with us, her mother said immediately. Thank you, I said sincerely. After a few more exchanged words, they left. That afternoon, once cleared for discharge, I called my dad. He and my mom arrived just in time, and after signing some paperwork, I was wheeled to their car. Back at my apartment, the place was a mess. Police had searched everything. It would take time to put things back in order. But one thing caught my eye immediately. A flashing light on my answering machine. I pressed play. A distorted voice crackled through the speaker. Dead meat. No context. No explanation. Just those two words. The caller ID was blocked. Something about the voice felt familiar. I replayed it. Then again. That's when it hit me. It wasn't a real voice. The phrase was lifted straight from an old Rocky movie, the one with Mr. T. Someone had recorded it and played it over the phone. I was still processing this when my doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, a knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I glanced through the peephole. A young brunette stood outside. I recognized her. She had been at the club the night I first met Derek. I scanned the empty hallway. She was alone, but something about this felt off. Pulling out my phone, I switched on the camera, set it to record, and slid it into my pocket. Then I unlocked the door, leaving the chain hooked as a precaution. Yes. A quiet voice answered, uncertain. Mr. Mercer? That's me. She hesitated, looking almost nervous. You're really Ethan Mercer? I frowned. Yeah. Who are you? Rachel Porter, she said. I work with your wife. Can I come in? I studied her for a beat. Are you alone? She nodded. Something about her body language told me she wasn't lying, but I still hesitated. After a moment, I shut the door, unhooked the chain, and let her in. Once she stepped inside, I locked it behind her and crossed my arms. What's this about, Rachel? She pulled a manila envelope from her bag and handed it to me. I stared at it. What is this? Just open it, she murmured. I set it on the coffee table and went to the kitchen, grabbing a pair of latex gloves before handling whatever was inside. Years in welding taught me to be careful with unknown materials. Peeling the envelope open, I pulled out a thick stack of photographs. The first one made my stomach drop. A dead man. His skin was pale, eyes dull, throat slit clean across. The crime scene looked staged, too deliberate, too precise. I flipped through the images, each one worse than the last. Who is this? I asked, looking up at Rachel. Tears welled in her eyes. Brian, she whispered. My husband. I clenched my jaw. Did you report this? She nodded, but her expression was bleak. The police called it a suicide. I scoffed. A suicide? With his throat cut open? You don't understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The firm controls everything, judges, cops, politicians. They own half this city, from the courtroom to the gutters. I exhaled sharply. Derek. A bitter smile flickered across her face. If he didn't do it himself, he made sure it happened. I studied her. Then why are you still working there? She stiffened. Because I don't have a choice. I narrowed my eyes. You're not just a paralegal, are you? She hesitated. No. I had a sick feeling in my gut. They tried to do the same to me, didn't they? Her expression darkened. My husband fought back. Her voice cracked. And he paid the price. I forced myself to stay calm. So what are you to them? She inhaled sharply, shame flashing in her eyes. I belong to them. The lawyers. The clients. Whoever they decide. A chill ran down my spine. And Samantha? She runs it all, Rachel muttered. She chooses who goes where, keeps things under control. Nothing happens without her approval. I clenched my jaw. And Madison? The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. I reached back into the envelope and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The moment I saw it, my stomach twisted. A message, made of magazine clippings. Stan Shipman, stand down or you'll be next. I exhaled slowly. Classic intimidation tactic. But I wasn't stupid enough to dismiss it. You read this? I asked. Rachel shook her head. No. It was left at my apartment this morning. The instructions said to deliver it to you. I flipped the note over, searching for anything else. Nothing. I studied her face. Would you be willing to take this to the district attorney? Her entire body tensed. No. I just want out. I nodded, processing everything. You have no idea what these people are capable of, especially Samantha, she said, her voice trembling. How deep does this go? I asked. Anyone above middle management knows, she admitted. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Thanks for telling me. Rachel shivered and rubbed her arms, as if suddenly cold. I really am sorry. You seem like a decent guy. Madison was lucky. I let out a bitter chuckle. Yeah, lucky. I walked her to the door. She lingered for a second, as if debating saying something else. Then she shook her head and stepped out. I waited until she disappeared down the hall before locking up. First the answering machine message. Now this. My plans had changed. Divorce was still happening. But now, I needed to survive first. I pulled my phone from my pocket and played back the secret recording I'd made of our conversation. Every word had been captured. Good. Then I grabbed the business card from the table. Victoria Hayes, Assistant District Attorney. Her personal number was scribbled on the back. I dialed. She answered on the second ring. This is Hayes. It's Ethan, I said. We need to talk. I just got a voicemail and a hand-delivered threat. A pause. Then her tone sharpened. That changes everything. Bring it to me. Now. She rattled off an address. I memorized it, then hung up. I needed to leave town. I grabbed a duffel bag, threw in some clothes, then hesitated. Something inside me whispered that I needed more than just a quick exit. I turned back and retrieved the object Madison had used on me that night. I wasn't sure why I took it. Maybe I needed a reminder. Or maybe I had other plans. Before heading out, I loaded a few welding tools into my truck. Then I called my boss. The job's wrapped up, and you've got vacation days saved, he said without hesitation. Take whatever time you need. Thanks, boss. One last sweep of the apartment. Then I locked up and hit the road. Half an hour later, I was at Victoria's door. She paled as she flipped through the photographs and read the note. You recorded your conversation? She asked. I nodded, pulling out my phone. You'll want to hear this. I hit play. She listened, pressing her fingers to her temple. When the recording ended, she exhaled. This explains a lot. Send me a copy. I handed her my phone so she could transfer the file. Then I remembered something. I still had Madison's phone. I pulled it from my pocket. I took this the night Derek attacked me. I had completely forgotten about Madison's phone. Victoria's eyes widened as she took it. This could be a gold mine. She turned it over in her hands, already thinking ahead. I'll have my tech team dig into it. But if Rachel's right, we might need to bypass local law enforcement. If the firm really has its hooks in the system, we can't trust anyone around here. She studied me for a moment. What's your next move? I'm getting out of town for a while. She nodded. Good call. You should think about witness protection. I huffed a laugh. Yeah, because that always goes smoothly. She sighed. Fine, but keep in touch. Will do. With no clear destination in mind, I hit the road. First stop, the bank. I withdrew as much cash as possible, watching my surroundings as I stepped out. The images from Rachel's envelope haunted me. The man in those photos had fought back. Now he was in a morgue. If I wasn't careful, I'd be next. By late afternoon, exhaustion set in. I pulled into a quiet rest stop and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. After a few rings, a familiar rough voice answered. Yeah. Mark, it's Ethan. Silence. Then his tone shifted. Well, look who it is. What's going on? I need a place to crash for a few days. Say no more, he said immediately. Just grab some beer on your way. Relief washed over me. You got it. A little tension eased from my shoulders as I steered onto the freeway, heading north. I made a stop at a convenience store, picking up beer, ice, and coffee. On impulse, I grabbed a pack of cigarettes, Mark's favorite brand. By 2:30 a.m., I pulled into his driveway. The porch light flicked on, and Mark stepped outside, stretching. Hope you brought the beer, he said, grinning. I tossed him the cigarettes. Inside, I carried the cooler to the kitchen, then stopped in my tracks. A blonde woman in an oversized t-shirt and pajama shorts was coming down the stairs. I turned to Mark. And who's this? Before he could answer, she smirked. You're an idiot. I blinked, then took a closer look. Natalie. She grinned. Surprised, dumbass? The awkward teenager I remembered had turned into a striking, confident woman. She crossed her arms. What are you doing here at this hour? Madison finally catch you cheating and kick you out? I let out a dry chuckle. Not exactly. Her teasing expression faded when her gaze landed on the bruises still visible on my face. Ethan, she said, her voice softer now. What the hell happened? I exhaled. That's why I'm here. Mark clapped a hand on my shoulder. Come on, grab a beer and spill it. I pulled 3 bottles from the cooler, handing one to Mark. I turned to Natalie. You even old enough to drink? She rolled her eyes, flipped me off, and grabbed the beer. Start talking. This is gonna get awkward, I warned. She shrugged. We're adults. Just tell us. So I did. I told them everything. Madison, Samantha, Derek, the threats. Then I played the recording of my conversation with Rachel. The room went silent. Damn, Mark muttered, setting down his beer. Think they know where you are? I doubt it, I said. No sign of a tail. Good. This place is hard to sneak up on. He took a long drag of his cigarette. I still got that gun I bought from your dad after Mikey's accident. You remember how to shoot? I nodded. Yeah, but I haven't touched one since that day. Years ago, my younger brother Mikey had an accidental discharge with my dad's .22. He survived, but it scared my old man enough to get rid of all his guns. Mark smirked. No problem. We'll head out back tomorrow. Knock off the rust. Natalie grinned. I'm a damn good shot. Does your dad know you're here? Mark asked. I shook my head. No, but I should update the ADA. I'll call your folks in the morning, Mark said. For now, turn off your phone. Maybe even pull the battery. I nodded and powered it down. So Madison and the others face a judge Monday? Natalie asked. Yeah. The DA is pushing for no bail, but after what Rachel told me, I wouldn't bet on it. You can stay as long as you need, Mark assured me. Thinking 2 weeks tops, I said. Take all the time you need, he repeated. I exhaled. Appreciate it, man. Mark smirked at Natalie. I'm sure she can think of ways for you to repay us. She rolled her eyes but smirked slightly. Relax, Mark added. Your family. Just breathe. Natalie stretched. Speaking of family, I'm making breakfast tomorrow. Scrambled eggs, hash browns. Sounds great. She headed upstairs. Once her door shut, Mark and I stepped outside for a cigarette. So what's her story? I asked. Figured she'd be married with kids by now. Mark blew out a cloud of smoke, watching the stars. Never found the right guy? No one measured up. To what? He gave me a look. You dumbass. I frowned. That's ridiculous. Not at all. She's always had a thing for you. Only reason she never said anything? Madison. She didn't want to get between you two. I rubbed a hand over my face. And you're sure she still feels that way? Mark smirked. Ever hear her at night? I narrowed my eyes. What? He chuckled. Let's just say she has a little toy, and your name gets called. I groaned. Jesus, man. TMI. He laughed. Just saying. I shook my head. Since when did she turn into a knockout? She always was, he said. You just had Madison blinders on. I sighed. Yeah, I remember. Mark's tone shifted. Look, if something happens between you two, that's fine. But do me a favor. What kind? Don't screw with her head. If you're done with Madison, be done. No games. I met his gaze. I'm done. Good, he said. Now I'm hitting the sack. See you in the morning. He flicked his cigarette into the can and walked inside. I finished mine, then crashed on the couch, exhaustion taking over. A creak woke me. Rise and shine, Natalie called. I groaned, rubbing my face. 8:30 a.m. Dragging myself up, I showered and dressed. My gaze landed on my wedding ring. I stared at it for a second before sliding it off and tossing it onto the dresser. Downstairs, the smell of coffee and eggs filled the air. Natalie stood at the stove, flipping eggs. Sunlight streamed in behind her, catching in her hair. "Smells good," I said, reaching for a coffee mug. Natalie flashed a grin. "Coffee's ready. Still take butter pecan creamer?" I raised an eyebrow. "You remember that?" "Fridge is stocked," she said, leaning against the counter. "Just don't use it all. Mark and I need some too." I poured a cup, stirring in the creamer, an old habit I'd picked up from my dad. Mark had picked it up too after my father introduced it to him on a job site years ago. "Sit," Natalie said, flipping eggs. "Breakfast is almost done." I took a seat across from Mark, who was buried in the Sunday paper. "Morning," I greeted. He grunted. "Morning. Anything interesting?" He flipped the paper around so I could see. "Big shot lawyer arrested on multiple charges." I skimmed the article, vague wording, no names, just legal jargon. But I knew exactly who it was about. Natalie rolled a cart over, stacked high with food. My stomach growled. "Damn, that smells amazing. Glad you approve." She winked as she set the plates down. After breakfast, Mark stood and rinsed his plate. "Need to run some errands. Be back in a few hours. If I need to call the ADA, I'll use the house phone," I said. "Good. Stay low." He gave me a pointed look before heading out. I turned to Natalie. "Need help with the dishes?" She smirked. "Not really, but I won't say no." I grabbed a towel, drying as she washed. She glanced at my hand. "So, the ring's off. Divorce is happening," I confirmed. Told her I wouldn't tolerate cheating, and I meant it. "Good." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Glad you still have a spine." I chuckled. "What about you? Anyone special in your life?" She hesitated. "There was, but life had other plans." I tilted my head. "Yeah." She sighed. "After Dad passed, I took care of Mom. Worked as a waitress to help with bills. Then when she got sick, I quit to be with her full-time. After she passed, we had to sell the house. Mark promised Mom I could stay here, so here I am." I frowned. "Did he ever offer to pay for school?" "He did," she admitted, "but I turned him down." "Why?" She shrugged. "Don't like owing anyone. I want to earn it myself." I nodded. "Fair enough. That's why I'm working at McDonald's while taking business classes at night," she added. I leaned back, impressed. "Good for you." She smiled slightly. "Mark has this plan to start a fabrication business. Wants me running the office side of things." I raised an eyebrow. "He's still talking about that?" "Yep," she said. "He already does custom metalwork, grills, trailers, gates, makes decent money. His dream is to turn his backyard shop into a real business." "I'd love to check it out," I said. A quiet moment settled between us. For the first time, I really saw Natalie not just as Mark's kid sister, but as a strong, determined woman. How had I never noticed before? She caught me staring. "What? You're incredible," I admitted before I could stop myself. Her eyes widened slightly before she looked away. "Don't mess with me." "I'm not," I said firmly. "You put your family first, refused easy handouts, and now you're building something for yourself. That's rare." I exhaled. "I just wish I'd noticed sooner." She chuckled softly. "You were too blinded by Madison." "Yeah," I muttered. "Guess I was." She shut off the faucet, drying her hands. "She used you, you know?" I sighed. "Yeah, I see that now." She folded her arms. "I saw through her years ago." I frowned. "Then why didn't you say anything?" She met my gaze evenly. "You wouldn't have believed me." She was right. Back then, Madison could do no wrong in my eyes. All I wanted was for her to be happy, I murmured. Natalie scoffed. "Yeah, and she took full advantage. She got a degree, a new car, a whole lifestyle on your dime. And when she didn't need you anymore, she moved on." She shook her head. "I'm glad she's in jail. If she weren't, I'd have a few choice words for her." I smirked. "I believe that." She crossed her arms. "Tell me one thing. Are you ever going to take her back?" I shook my head. "No. That door is closed for good." "Good," she said, satisfied. "She never deserved you." She rolled her shoulders. "We should clean up before Mark gets back. I need to get the meat out for dinner. You should take a shower." I nodded. "Sounds like a plan. What's for dinner?" "Venison," she said casually. "We barbecue on Sundays." My eyebrows lifted. "I love venison. Haven't had it in years." She grinned. "Perfect." I shot at myself with Mark's flintlock. I blinked. You loaded it yourself? Of course. She smirked. Patched round ball, 100 grains of double F powder, even molded the bullet myself. I let out a low whistle. Damn. You fish too. Made my own hooks and cleaned my own catch, she said without hesitation. I shook my head, impressed. Is there anything you haven't done? Her smirk widened. Haven't rebuilt Mark's truck gearbox yet, but I did help with the engine. I laughed. I think I'm in love. She chuckled. Save it for tonight. I arched an eyebrow. Oh. With a casual shrug, she added, by the way, you're sleeping in my room now. My bed's bigger. I hesitated. Won't Mark care? She shrugged. Nope. Besides, we're both adults. I ran a hand through my hair. I should call the DA, let her know where I am. Natalie pointed to the house phone. Go for it. I dialed, and Victoria picked up on the second ring. Ethan, I was getting worried. I shut off my cell just in case, I said. Smart. The feds are already looking into your wife's firm. I exhaled. Not surprised. One more thing, she added. I lined up a top divorce attorney for you. Appreciate it. Call her tomorrow. I'll update you after the hearing. As soon as I hung up, Mark's truck rumbled into the driveway. I stepped outside to help him unload. He handed me a bag. Oh, by the way, he said, tossing me a knowing look. I called your folks. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah. Mark nodded. They were worried, so I told them you're laying low here for a while. I exhaled. Appreciate it, man. That night, we fired up the grill, cooking venison while sitting out on the patio. The meal was simple, but it hit the spot. After dinner, Mark and I grabbed a couple of beers and stepped outside for a smoke while Natalie finished cleaning up. He took a slow drag, exhaling into the night air. She said you're sleeping in her room. I hesitated. Yeah. For how long? I shrugged. Not sure. Need to get the divorce finalized first. Mark shot me a knowing look. You love her? Yes, I admitted without hesitation. He nodded, like he'd been waiting for me to say it. Good. Should have figured that out years ago. His tone softened. Natalie's tough, but she's been through a lot. Just don't mess her up. I'd never hurt her, I said firmly. Mark extended a hand. Then welcome to the family. I shook it, and he smirked. Just keep it down tonight, all right? I chuckled. I'll try. Later, after Natalie and I made love, I held her close, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. She traced lazy circles on my chest. What are you thinking about? The future, I murmured. She lifted her head slightly. What about it? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? She sighed. A lot of women want careers, but that's not really me. I want a husband, a family. That's enough. I brushed a strand of hair from her face. And your business classes? That's more for Mark, she admitted. I'm helping him get his business off the ground. But what do you want? She smiled softly. You. I kissed her forehead. I always thought I had everything with Madison. A stable home. A wife I could trust. Turns out I was dead wrong. She cupped my cheek. I know. My job takes me away sometimes, I said. You okay with that? She laughed. Ethan, my brother's a welder. I know exactly how that life works. As long as I know you're coming home to me, I can handle anything. I held her gaze. I wish I'd met you before Madison. Me too, she whispered. But we have each other now. That's what matters. I love you, I said, kissing her deeply. She smiled against my lips. I love you more. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. By morning, Natalie was already up, making breakfast before heading out for work. On her way out the door, she kissed me. I've got class after my shift, so I'll be back around 9:30, she said. Behave. And remember, I love you. I squeezed her hand. I love you too. She smiled, and something in her eyes told me that meant the world to her. Behind me, Mark cleared his throat. What, no kiss for me? Natalie rolled her eyes but kissed his cheek. You two try not to burn the place down, she teased before heading out. I checked my watch. I need to call that lawyer Victoria recommended. Mark pointed toward the phone. Go for it. I dialed, and a receptionist answered promptly. Law Office of Angela Thornton. How can I help you? Keeping my tone direct, I said. My name is Ethan Mercer. Victoria Hayes told me to reach out to Miss Thornton. One moment, Mr. Mercer. After a brief pause, a confident voice came through the line. This is Angela Thornton. Tell me everything. I walked her through my situation, laying out the key details. She listened intently. What are you hoping for? She finally asked. No alimony, I said firmly. I just want my fair share of what's mine. With your wife's legal troubles, you're in a strong position, she said. I'll send over paperwork for you to sign electronically, along with a checklist of things to do. The retainer needs to be paid today. Can you manage that? Yes. Good. I'll handle the rest. After finalizing the payment, I powered up my laptop. Angela had already sent the documents. I signed them and started working through the financial checklist. Within the hour, I had set up a personal bank account, transferred half of our joint funds, and canceled Madison's credit card, keeping mine open for now. By noon, Mark and I were in his shop, welding a trailer frame for a local farmer. It was a welcome distraction. Then the house phone rang. Mark answered, listened for a second, then handed it to me. It's your lawyer. This is Ethan, I said. Bad news, Victoria's voice came through the line. The judge granted the lowest possible bail. They're out. My grip on the phone tightened. How? Probably a judge on their payroll, she said bluntly. The restraining order is still in place, but let's be honest, it's just a piece of paper. The feds are keeping tabs on them, but I can't guarantee your safety. I exhaled through my nose. Great. Stay put and let me handle it, she continued. Call me if anything changes. I hung up. Mark eyed me. What's going on? The judge let them walk. Damn, he muttered. I should call your folks. I'll do it, I said, reaching for the phone. My dad picked up on the second ring. Hey, son. I wasted no time. Listen, the judge released Madison and her crew. You and Mom need to be careful. They might come looking for me. His voice remained steady. Don't worry. We won't say a word. Then, after a brief pause, he asked, You still at Robert Langley's? My stomach twisted. Robert Langley was a retired welder who lived 2 hours south. Dad knew exactly where I was. Madison must have been standing right there, forcing him to say that. I forced my voice to stay calm. No, I checked into a motel about 50 miles south. Dad's response was clipped, his tone tight. Good to know. I played along. I'm heading east tomorrow morning. Keep me posted, all right? Yeah, Dad said, his voice just a little too steady. Is Mom there? I asked. She's in the bathroom, he answered, but something in his tone sent a chill through me. I strained to hear the background noise. There was something off. I clenched my jaw. All right, I said carefully. Tell her I love her. I will, son. My pulse pounded as I held on to the silence between us. We'll talk soon, Dad added, his voice firm. Yeah, I forced out. Love you. Love you too. I hung up, my hands tightening into fists. Something was wrong. As soon as I hung up, I turned to Mark. I think Madison and her crew are at my parents' place. His jaw tightened. You sure? Pretty damn sure. Without hesitation, I redialed Victoria. She picked up instantly. Ethan? I think Madison and her goons are at my parents' house, trying to get my location. Her tone sharpened. Hold tight. I'm sending federal agents now. Stay put. As soon as the call ended, I met Mark's gaze. They're trying to get my parents to give me up. His expression darkened. You think they bought the motel lie? I exhaled. Maybe for a few hours. If they head south first, we've got some time. Mark crossed his arms. Then we need a plan. Maybe you should move again. I shook my head. No, he said firmly. We're in this together. Stay put. I'll talk to the sheriff. Just don't go anywhere. I nodded, though my gut twisted with uncertainty. A couple of hours later, Mark left for town. Not long after, Victoria called back. You were right, she said grimly. Madison, Samantha, Derek, and a few others showed up at your parents' place after the hearing. They tied them up, tried to threaten them, but your dad never gave up your location. We managed to arrest one of their guys, but he's not talking. My grip tightened on the phone. Do you know where the rest of them went? Not yet, but they didn't buy the motel story, she admitted. Here, talk to your dad. A moment later, my father's voice came through, low and tense. Ethan, I don't think they fell for it. My chest tightened. Are you and Mom okay? For now, he said carefully. But I think Madison and her people are heading your way. I clenched my jaw. How do you know? I overheard Madison talking. My blood ran cold. I turned to Victoria. Get the sheriff down here. Already on it, she said. Where exactly are you? I quickly gave her the address. Does Madison know this place? I hesitated, then answered grimly. Yeah. Stay put. Help is coming. The call ended, but the tension in my chest didn't ease. Then, behind me. Well, thought you could outsmart us. I turned slowly. Derek stood there, smirking, a tool resting casually in his grip. My stomach clenched. Nice try with the motel lie, he sneered. Lucky for us, Madison knew exactly where you'd run. He lifted his weapon slightly. Now move. Derek gestured toward a black SUV parked in the driveway, making it clear I had no choice. I climbed into the back seat, and there she was, Madison, her smirk dripping with arrogance. Thought you could outsmart us, she taunted. I met her gaze. Cops will be here soon. She scoffed. Too late for you. Samantha and Derek chuckled up front. Take him to the creek, Derek ordered. As the SUV rumbled down a dirt path, I kept my face neutral. So this is how it ends? I asked. Really going to get rid of me? Madison laughed. Dead men don't talk. Derek grinned. Let's finish this. Then, a crack. A rifle shot. Then another. Madison's smirk vanished as she ducked behind Derek. Panic set in. A four-wheeler tore through the woods, kicking up dust. Blonde hair flying in the wind. Natalie. She braked hard, rifle in hand. Touch him again, and I'll put you in the ground. Madison froze. Sirens blared in the distance. Natalie grabbed a flare tool from her bag and fired it into the sky, the red streak marking our location. Minutes later, flashing lights cut through the trees. Natalie ran straight to me, cupping my face. Are you okay? I exhaled, tension finally easing. Now I am. She smirked. Took your sweet time needing a rescue. Mark arrived next, scanning me for injuries. You good? I nodded. Thanks to Natalie. Deputies swarmed the area while paramedics checked on Madison and Samantha. Samantha shrieked, pointing an accusatory finger. She shot Derek and Randy. Arrest her. The sheriff barely spared her a glance. Self-defense. Fortress doctrine applies. You're lucky she didn't do worse. Madison and Samantha were cuffed and dragged toward the patrol cars. The sheriff turned to me. They're being charged with attempted homicide and conspiracy. I nodded. Good. By the time the coroner's van rolled away, it was finally over. Natalie and I rode back in silence, the adrenaline wearing off. I glanced at her. Thought you had class? She grinned. Mark found me at work. I dropped everything. I squeezed her waist gently. How'd you find me? She smirked. Followed tire tracks. Climbed into my deer stand. Saw what was happening and reacted. I kissed her temple. I owe you everything. That night, I called Victoria. It's over, I said. She sighed in relief. The feds have what they need. That firm is finished. Madison and Samantha were convicted of attempted homicide, conspiracy, and my attack. They both received life sentences. The firm collapsed under federal charges, racketeering, bribery, multiple homicides. Every partner got life. Their assets were liquidated to pay lawsuits. 6 months later, I was free. Angela finalized my divorce, securing a settlement from Samantha and Derek's estate. When the dust settled, I had more money than I ever expected. So I bought Natalie a ring and proposed the right way on one knee. She squealed, kissed me breathless, and shouted, yes. A month later, we tied the knot in Vegas. When we returned, we hit Mark with a surprise. DNS welding and custom fabrications, I said, sliding a business plan across the table. You in? He raised an eyebrow. You serious? Hell yeah. He flipped through the pages, nodding slowly. This could work. Then he tossed a set of keys onto the table. You know that lot on the south side? Natalie frowned. Yeah. You see the new 2-bedroom house on it? I nodded. Thought it was sold. Mark smirked. Nope. That's your wedding gift from me and your parents. Natalie gasped. Brand new, fully furnished, already in your names. I shook my head, speechless. Mark chuckled. Go check it out. I need a break from hearing you two all night anyway. Natalie turned red as I laughed. That night, we celebrated with family. As Natalie curled against me in our new home, she whispered, everything turned out perfect. I kissed her forehead. Yeah, I murmured. It really did. It's been 3 years since everything fell apart. And then came back together in a way I never expected. Madison and Samantha are locked away where they belong. Derek didn't make it out that night, and I can't say I've lost any sleep over it. The firm crumbled under federal indictments, bribery, coercion, even human trafficking. Rachel testified, and with witness protection, she finally got a fresh start. As for me, I built one of my own. DNS welding took off fast, and now it's one of the most respected names in town. But the best part? Natalie. She's been by my side through it all. We bought a house, some land, and a baby's on the way. Sometimes, I think about how different life could have been if I hadn't walked into that bar. But that's not who I am anymore. I build things that last, and this time, I'm building the life I was always meant to have.